Rudy, I mentioned, of course, in the intro just a minute ago, former advisor in the Harper government, and guess who showed up yesterday to introduce Pierre Poilievre? Stephen Harper making a reappearance. I'm wondering what your take on that was.
Yes, it's very interesting because Stephen Harper decided not to get involved when Andrew Scheer ran for prime minister, the same way when Erin O'Toole did. So it's the first time in a decade that Prime Minister Harper hit the road in terms of the campaign. So I do believe that some people will see it as a plus. Some people do remember when it comes to the legacy of Stephen Harper, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to managing the crisis. Others, like, for example, the Bloc Québécois, is saying, Mr. Harper doesn't have a good reputation in Quebec, so it's going to hurt the Conservative. We'll see what's going to happen. Remember that last week, Pierre Poilievre received the endorsement of Caroline Mulroney. So now with having Caroline Mulroney on one side in Ontario, now Stephen Harper in Alberta and in the West, this at least gives him a little bit more highlight in terms of media. And it was a very successful rally yesterday in Edmonton. Some people are saying that it was more than 10,000 people. But again, you know that the Conservatives are very strong in the West, but they need to be strong in the East, and they have to win seats in Ontario. So we'll see. Is it only the first appearance of Stephen Harper? Are we going to see more of him perhaps in other part of the region or the country? We'll see. But that's what made the news yesterday. Stephen Harper endorsing Pierre Poilievre and also saying something very interesting. He said that both Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney worked for him, and he was best to say that he supports Pierre Poilievre and not Mark Carney.
Let me ask the question. Some might suggest that Stephen Harper showing up after not having, of course, been there, as you just said, for the last two Conservative candidates, is perhaps a sign of concern, given the fact that the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre continue to trail in the polls. So this is kind of like, I'm not sure how you'd phrase it, but basically, kind of a last kick at the can. Is that, do you think, is there any truth to that?
Maybe there's some of it. I mean, it is, and he said it himself, that it is the most important election in terms of the economy, in terms of who can step up to the American, to Washington, to Donald Trump. So I think that there's a sense of urgency in terms of the importance of this election and the choice that is going to be made in terms of the economy. So I believe that he didn't want to stay on the sideline for this very important election.
I'm curious, you worked with him in a capacity, we said off the top. Why do you think he didn't choose to get involved in the other two times that we had a different Conservative leader?
Because, Prime Minister Harper never wanted to be kind of, question either. Even he did it for Justin Trudeau. He gave very rare interviews. He didn't want to get involved. He's not the type like Jean Chrétien who you would see him a lot more, or even, for example, in Quebec, former Premier Charest, who's more in the news. Prime Minister Harper is more a discreet man. It's more part of his personality, and he didn't want to kind of second guess. And to be honest, when he was Prime Minister, he didn't like the fact that sometimes his former Prime Minister basically criticized him. So he preferred not to do the same with, for example, Justin Trudeau. But I do believe that because of the stakes are so high, especially with the U.S., that he decided that he needed to come out.
I would ask you as well, we know that in the past couple of days, we have a new Nanos poll out today, and we're seeing polls, of course, every day. It seems, from what we're seeing, that the spread, polling-wise anyway, between the Conservatives and the Liberals is beginning to narrow. It was, I think it's either 5 or 6 points closer now than it was only 3 or 4 days ago. Why do you think that is?
I do believe that we're kind of transitioning to a more traditional campaign, focusing more on Canadian issues. I know, the tariff war with the U.S. and the stock exchange is very worrying. But at the same time, we can see it today. For example, Mark Carney spoke more about, for example, housing. Immigration is also now a topic. So it will be very interesting if in the upcoming days and the second half of this campaign, if political parties are going to focus more on Canadian issues, and maybe it can explain that Canadians are also paying attention on what are the party proposing in terms of, for example, housing and immigration. Especially, like, for example, today, Quebec government did raise a flag in terms of more asylum seekers at the border. So you can see that both federal parties will have to react more, for example, on immigration, which has been a topic that we haven't touched since the beginning of this election.
So we know that in Quebec, it's funny, there was a clip today, I don't know whether you heard it or not, from Yves-François Blanchet, and the question was about, Stephen Harper and coming to Quebec, to which
yes.
you heard the clip, right? Yves-François Blanchet, let him come, because obviously that would help them, because he doesn't have a lot of fans, I guess, in Quebec. How important do you think, speaking of fans, how important do you think the French debate is going to be for before I even get to the French debate? He has an appearance on Tout le monde en parle this weekend, right?
Yes, Pierre Poilievre is scheduled for an appearance at Tout le monde en parle. Last Sunday, it was Jagmeet Singh. We still don't know if Mark Carney is going to attend. You have to know that Tout le monde en parle is more than 1 million viewers in Quebec, so it's a very important show. Sometimes it's more to show kind of a softer side than just talk only about, policy issues. So I do believe that it's an important test for Pierre Poilievre, maybe to soften his image in Quebec, and also for Francophone across the country, because Francophone also watch this show. But, it will be also interesting to see if Mark Carney is going to go. And you just mentioned Stephen Harper. As you know, Stephen Harper never attended this show. And that was also sometimes people criticize him for not attending, saying, he doesn't care about Quebec. But we'll see if Mark Carney does the same. In my own personal opinion, I do believe that Mark Carney needs to do this, especially the fact that he turned down the TVA debate. I do believe that he needs to show up for that show. We'll see what the performance of Pierre Poilievre showing a more softer side during that interview.
So we've arrived at a point in time, and I remember we speculated about this maybe a week ago when the Trump tariffs finally hit and the focus wasn't on them every single day. And we've seen, I think to a degree, all the leaders now sort of shift away from this whole idea of tariffs, at least, as I said, to some degree. So if we're going to talk about housing and the various things like, today I know Pierre Poilievre came out and talked about, making the tax system fair, et cetera. What about, though, the issue, because we're going to have someone coming on just after 5:30 who actually thinks that tariffs could be good for Canada. What's the policy here as far as Pierre Poilievre is concerned on tariffs? Is it fighting back? Is it retaliating? What is it?
There's not a lot of difference, actually, between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre when it comes to tariffs, because both said that we need to have counter tariffs, and it's actually kicking in tonight, especially when it comes to cars. The difference, it's more how to grow the economy. Pierre Poilievre is saying that we need to, for example, have a pipeline, have some liquid natural gas, for example, in Quebec and in the country, which is not a position that for the moment Mr. Carney is willing to go that far. He's saying that he's open to it. For the difference with Mr. Poilievre, he's saying, no, it will happen. But it's also a question of making the economy stronger. But now the question is, are there going to be job loss? Are there going to be closure? Some people are saying we need maybe more EI benefits. So if there's going to be more impact in terms of tariffs, both parties, the Conservatives and the Liberals, will have to propose some economic measures, especially if there's some job losses.
Just as a final question, what did you make of Jagmeet Singh today coming out and talking about not allowing foreign ownership of homes in this country?
Look, it's very, very difficult for Jagmeet Singh. I mean, he needs to find a spot in this campaign. He needs to show that he's still a contender. Look, the polls are terrible for him. He's at 8%. 8% means he will only have 8 seats, and he had 25 seats before at the start of the election. And also something that is very worrying for him is that he's going to, if you look at the polls today, he's actually going to lose his own riding of Burnaby Central in British Columbia. He's not even second in that riding. He's third behind the Conservative and the Liberals. So it's very difficult for Jagmeet Singh as a leader, but also as a member of parliament, that if you look at the polls, there's a strong probability that he's not going to get reelected. And just remember that he inherited the NDP under Thomas Mulcair. They had 44 seats, and now they're looking at 8 seats. So it's very, very difficult for Jagmeet Singh. Even if he's trying to push some issues, he doesn't have any momentum or any space because everybody is focusing on either the Liberals or the Conservatives to form the next government.
All right, so I guess we shouldn't be surprised by statements like that. There'll probably be a few more coming because, he needs to reach deep, I guess, and try to come up with something. All right, Rudy, I thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.